We will be dealing with the results and the consequences of Sulh Hudaybiyah. And one of the relevant surahs basically coming with the issue of Fath is Surah Nasr, which is surah number 10 of the Qur'an. This is of course, one of the last surahs. And we heard some ahadith from our imams about this being the last surah revealed. Now, many people will be confused. How can it be? Because this was revealed in the 8th year of the Hijrah. What actually the hadith means is that this is the last complete surah to be revealed. It doesn't mean the Qur'an, the revelation of Qur'an, ended with the revelation of this surah. This was the one complete surah which was revealed. The last one was Surah Nasr, because the revelation continued after that, almost till the days of the Prophet's life. Now, this is something which I had even discussed in Ramadan 2007, but this is more a second version of it, with a lot of additions that we are going to go through. Let me start with the first surah, first ayat, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. That when Allah's help and victory comes, then what is to be done? Basically, this chapter came after Sulh Hudaybiyah and before Fath Makkah. So this is very much into the context of the surah that we have discussed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talked about Sulh Hudaybiyah, He mentioned it, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared that peace treaty as a obvious or clear victory for the Prophet and the Muslims. And here, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word Fath. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. So there is a connection there, and although the treaty itself is known as Fath, but the real worldly manifestation of that Fath was in Fath Makkah. Now this was actually revealed before Fath Makkah, before the actual event, as a prophecy and good news to the Prophet of Islam. And that is why the word Iva, when this happens, then you have to do this and that. Again, most of the discussion would be about this first ayat of the surah. Number one, just to connect with our discussion in Surah Al-Fath. We know that from the beginning of the Hijrah till the 6th year of the Hijrah, the Muslims were constantly under attack from the mushrikeen of Mecca. Sometimes only the mushrikeen, sometimes the allies of the mushrikeen in form of the Jewish tribes and other tribes in the Arabian Peninsula. And then we come to the Zil-Qa'dah, 6th of the Hijrah, where the Prophet goes with the intention of Umrah. The mushrikeen prevent him, and that prevention ends in the peace treaty signed between both parties, known as Sulh Hudaybiyah, which is the main theme of Surah Al-Fath. A year after that, the Prophet goes for Umratul Qadha, which is fulfillment of the Qadha, of the Umrah that they had not done in the 6th year. And then in the 8th year, in the month of Ramadan, is the time when the Muslims take over the city of Mecca. And so the timing is just about, less than 2 years. Within 2 years of conclusion of the Sulh Hudaybiyah, Mecca is in control of the Prophet and the Muslims. And this is indeed when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا. This is indeed a very obvious victory. And the consequences of that is that we see that soon after that, there's one of the companions of the Prophet. He says that the other tribes in the Arabian Peninsula, They were all looking at Quraysh. They said, this is a personal issue between Muhammad and Quraysh. And let us see. We'll just sit there, and see who wins at the end. And then we'll go with the winning party. And so Fateh Makkah was really the deciding factor for many of the Arabs around Medina. And so after the conquest of Makkah, gradually you see many tribes coming in, some of them with understanding that this is the true religion. Some of them, they are opportunists. They see, now Muslims are the victorious group in the peninsula. We go with them. And just like the Americans are going with the Arab masses these days. Hosni Mubarak was there all the time. More than 25 years. They never talked about people's right or, things like that. Now that things have changed, they want to be on the winning side. And so the 9th year historians describe it as Amul Wufud, the year of delegation. Now what was the basis of this conquest of Mecca? It's everything to do with Hudaybiyah. If you remember, there were two conditions there, and just planted this from the other slide. Number one, that there will be no war between the Quraysh and the Muslims for 10 years. So this peace treaty was for 10 years. And one of the last conditions was that any tribe of Arabia is free to join either of the two parties. And they will be allies of the one or the other. And once they are allied with one or the other party, this agreement applies to them also. And what happened was basically a tribe known as the tribe of Khuza'a. They allied with the Muslims. They were not necessarily Muslims, but they allied. They became allies of the Muslims of Medina. The other was the tribe of Banu Bakr, which joined the Mushrikeen of Mecca. In that same 8th year, Banu Bakr, with support of some of the Quraysh from Mecca, attacked Khuza'a. This is how now the politics is coming in. So you have Meccans with their tribe, Banu Bakr, and then you have Medina Muslims here with their ally by the name of Khuza'a. Now the Bani Bakr attacked the Khuza'a. And when they were attacked with the support of some of the people from Mecca, many of the people were killed. Then the representative of Khuza'a then came to Medina. And they came to Rasulullah and they said, we have an agreement with you, that you will be with us and we will be with you. And this is where the Bani Bakr, who are an ally of Quraysh, they have attacked us. And we seek justice from you. And this is where the Prophet basically sent an ambassador or a representative from him to Mecca, and he gave them 3 choices. And nobody can say that the Prophet was not fair with them. Number one, the Prophet said that Banu Bakr, the ally of Quraysh, should compensate the Khuza'a for their losses. So we are not even talking about, intiqam and revenge in kind. Rather, at least they should give them monetary compensation, redeem them for their losses in lives as well as property. This is first option. If Banu Bakr doesn't do that, then the Mushrikeen of Mecca, the Quraysh, have to break their alliance with Banu Bakr, so that then the Muslims can deal with them directly. Because if they are with you, then we still have a problem. We have a treaty with you. And if you don't accept any of these 2 options, then the third is that the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is null and void, because you are not standing by the terms and the conditions. Somebody from you, allied to you, has attacked somebody from us. And if you do not go through this process, then there is no sense in having this agreement. So this will be null and void, and this 10 years term that we have doesn't mean anything. And this is where we see that makaru wa makar Allah. These people came to Rasulullah, basically wrote down all these conditions. Some of these simple Muslims didn't even know. They were saying, what Rasul is doing is insulting our religion by giving into these kinds of conditions. They didn't realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what is the best. And it is these conditions in the peace treaty which actually trapped the mushrikeen of Makkah. And so the Prophet's response was very clear about it, that you have these three choices. Now Abu Sufyan then comes to Medina. And, he tries to convince the Prophet to strengthen the treaty and even extend the term of the treaty more than 10 years. And Rasulullah said, what I have said to you is very clear. You had three options, and you don't want to follow any of it, then, this treaty doesn't make any sense to us at all. So he then sought help from others around. It's interesting that he goes to the house of the Prophet. One of his daughters was from the azwaj of Rasulullah. And as soon as he comes inside, in that room, let me look at these wordings. Yeah, he goes to the room of Habiba, his daughter, the wife of Rasulullah, and he wanted to sit down on that mattress. And that is where immediately she folds the mattress and puts it away. And he felt very offended, of course, this is the father. And she says, Ya bunayya, araghibti bihadha al-firash anni? You take away this mattress from me, I'm your father. And that is where she says, Naam, hada firash Rasulullah. This is the mattress not only of me, this is of Rasulullah. وَمَا كُنْتَ لَتَجْلِسَ عَلَيْهِ وَأَنْتَ رِجْسٌ مُشْرِكٌ. And you are not going to sit on the mattress of Rasulullah while you are rijsun mushrik. You are an idol worshipper and najis. And, so he comes out of his daughter's room, goes to others, the Sahaba, including Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he basically comes back to Mecca disappointed. Didn't get what he wanted. And probably he didn't realize that, Muslims had become stronger. He was still considering them to be like what they were before. The Prophet prepared a force of 10,000, fully armed soldiers with their own uniforms. Actually, if we may use the modern terms, every regiment has had its own uniform, and they would basically be, going by their own uniform and the flag. The plan of the Prophet was to reach Mecca unannounced. Now it's not easy, but Rasulullah knew the strategy, and this was all a secret plan. However, this is where we see sometimes even those who are Muslims, but they have weak iman, create problems for Islam and even for the Prophet himself. There was a person by the name of Hatim bin Abi Balta'a. And interestingly, he's one of those who were in Hudaybiyah, who had even done Bay'at al-Rizwan. And this is an example that you cannot say anybody who did the Bay'at is, okay, and they are guaranteed to be Jannati. This is where we see that this fellow knew that a lady had come from Mecca for her own personal issues. She was not a Muslim. And when she was going back, he goes to her, gives her some money, and says that I have a letter that I would like you to take it to the people of Mecca. And in that letter he had written a warning that Rasulullah is coming with a fully armed force, so be prepared to defend yourselves. And what is amazing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed Rasulullah that there is a person in Medina who has betrayed you by informing the enemy about your approach to Mecca. So based on that revelation, and this is based in Surah Mumtahina, Surah number 60, early ayat number 1 to 3. And Rasulullah deputed a small group headed by Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib to go, and the Prophet said that this is the point where this lady has reached, go and search her to get the letter from her and bring the letter back. When they went, they basically asked her, but they didn't find anything in her belongings, and she said, no, I don't have any letter. Other companions who had come with Ali, they said, okay, we didn't find anything, so we go back. But this is where the issue of true and absolute loyalty to Rasulullah comes in. Ali said, no, my Rasul can never be wrong. If he has said that she has a letter, she has a letter. And so he took out his Zulfiqar. He said, the Prophet has said you have it, and I'm not going to go without it. And so when she saw the Zulfiqar of Ali, she took out, the letter was hidden in between her hair, and she gave it to Ali, and they came back. And Rasulullah called this fellow, Khatib bin Abi Balta'a, that, what did you do? He said, yeah, I've done this, but I have not betrayed my faith. I'm still a Muslim. I only done it because I have a family there who are not that strong, and mushrikeen still harass them. I have absolute yaqeen that you are the winner in this case, but I wanted just to put an obligation, sense of obligation of mushrikeen of Makkah, so that they will not harass my family anymore. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't like it at all, and the ayat were revealed from Surah Mumtahina, where the words are very clear, that you can never take the enemy of Rasul and Allah to be your friend. And so on this issue, it's even relevant to us now, that when we talk about the issue of friendship with others, we have to make sure that they have to be either neutral or, more positive as far as Islam and Muslims are concerned. But if they are part of the movement of the enemies of Islam or Muslims, we are not allowed to be friends of such kind of people. The Prophet left Medina with 10,000 people on the 10th of Ramadan, 8th Hijrah, and on the way, his uncle Abbas met them. He was actually doing hijrat now from Mecca to Medina. And so Rasulullah told him that, send all your belongings and everything to Medina, but you come with us. You'll come with, we are going to Mecca. And that is where Rasulullah said that you are Khatimul Muhajirin. Means after this, there is no issue of hijrat from Mecca, because Mecca is going to become ours. So that is where we get this title for Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, as Khatimul Muhajirin, the last of the Muhajirin. The Muslims went and camped outside the city of Mecca, and of course, when the people of Mecca found out, especially if you have, a campsite of 10,000 soldiers, having their own fire to cook food, it's not something you can hide really. But they already are now outside the city of Mecca. And many of them came outside to see, and they were discussing, which group is this? And Abu Sufyan was there somebody said it is this and that tribe. He said, no, the number doesn't show that this could be this or that tribe. And that's where they came to realize that this is the Prophet of Islam with his soldiers already at the door of the city of Mecca. Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, was a politician. He always looked for more political way of resolving the problem. And he wanted to somehow convince the people of Mecca not to resist the Prophet and his army, rather to give in without any bloodshed. And so he basically talks with the Prophet and he says, let me go and at least convince them that they don't have the ability to resist the Muslims or fight against them. So it's better for them just to give in without any bloodshed. Along the way, now he is going with the camel of Rasulullah. He's been given that just to give assurance to the other party that what he is saying is also on behalf of the Prophet. That's where he heard Abu Sufyan and someone else talking to one another, and Abbas recognized his voice. So he told him that, is this Abu Sufyan? And he says, is this Abu al-Fadl? Abbas had a son by the name of Fazl, one of the cousins of Rasulullah. And he said, yes. So he met him and he said, this is my nephew. And this is Muslims' army. And you really don't have any power to resist them. It is better for you to come in, give in, accept Islam, and that is the end of the story. And so he comes to Rasulullah, sitting behind him on the camel of the Prophet. Many people saw him, including the Umar ibn Khattab, and he said, this is the chance now to deal with him. Well, but he didn't deal with him right away. He went to Rasulullah to say, he's coming. Do you allow me to eliminate him? It was already too late. Abbas, the uncle, came in and he said, no, I have brought him under my guarantee and my protection. You cannot harm him at the moment. And so, then Rasulullah said, okay, you keep him with yourself and we'll see tomorrow morning. Early morning he comes back. And this is where now the Prophet says to Abu Sufyan, that is this not the time that you should not accept Islam? That there is only one God, but Allah. He says, well, by the way, the idols have betrayed me in all different battles. Yeah, I know there is only one God now. And so he said, I accept it. Then Rasulullah said, what about me as Rasulullah? And this is where the fellow says, well, on this matter I still have some doubts. And that's what Abbas says. Don't you realize your situation here? What will happen to you? And so that's where he basically recites the kalima. And so his iman is already, by his own words, that he still has doubt in the nubuwwat of Rasulullah. But just because he uttered the words, Muslims don't have a problem with him. Because he is the father of Muawiyah. On the other side, they look at this, uncle of Rasulullah by the name of Abu Talib, who has sacrificed everything for Rasulullah and Islam. According to them, just because they didn't utter the words, he is kafir. They go out of their way to talk about it, to write books about it. Why? Because his only crime was that he was the father of Ali. So history basically goes backwards. And this sentiment that he expressed in the presence of Rasulullah was not changed. Was not convinced of the nubuwwat. Then Rasulullah basically told Abbas, take him to a high place and let him watch how my troops march towards Mecca. And when any different groups would come with their own colorful, different colors of uniform, Abbas will say, this is this group, this is this group. And so Abu Sufyan turns and says, your nephew has indeed acquired a very powerful and grand kingdom. Now, although he has already recited the kalima. And that's where Abbas says, you still didn't realize that this is not kingship. This is a nubuwwat. And so, then Abbas, in his political nature, he said to Rasulullah that maybe, in order to make sure that there is no resistance from the side of people of Mecca, why don't you just announce and give some privilege to Abu Sufyan? And this is where the Prophet basically announces three things. Number one, he says, go and tell the people of Mecca that whoever seeks protection in the house of Abu Sufyan, he will not be harmed. Whoever seeks protection in Masjid al-Haram would be safe. Whoever seeks protection in the house of Hakim bin Hizam, and finally, whoever stays indoor, they close the door, they don't resist the Muslim army, nobody will be harmed in any way. Just going back to this point here, shallowness of Abu Sufyan's belief, this continued. Even during the days of Osman, this fellow lived for a long time. When Osman became the Khalifa, and this is the first Umayyad Khalifa in the history, Abu Sufyan goes to that gathering of Banu Umayyah, and he says, as the elder of the family, he says, now that the bowl has come to you, make sure you pass it from one member of the clan to the other, and it doesn't go out of you. Why? Because he says this power and, rulership, this is the reality. About the Qiyamah, whether there is a Qiyamah or not, there is Jannah or Jahannam or not, we are not sure about it. This is reality, that is, we don't know about it. So his Iman was always, of that quality. And that is reflected in his grandson Yazid also later on. A point I would like to make here is that although Rasulullah had given kind of an amnesty to everyone in Mecca, but there were 4 to 7 names. He said, if you find them even hanging on to the covering of the Kaaba, kill them. And out of those 4 to 7, 2 of them were women. And most of them are those people who used to actually either compose poetry or recite poetry, cursing and abusing the Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is just for those who would always would like to look at the seerah of the Prophet in a selective manner. According to the modern secular point of view, they would always, block this aspect of Prophet's life. We have to accept Islam the way it is. We have to accept Rasulullah the way he was. We can't try to put our secular Western ideals onto the Prophet of Islam. And this is where we see that, not all 7 of them were killed. Some of them ran away. Some of them were caught. I think Amir al-Mu'minin dealt with 2 or 3 of them. And one of them was Abdullah bin Abi Sarah, a foster brother and probably the cousin of Osman bin Affan. He was one of those mentioned here because he had come to Medina, became a Muslim, was even appointed as one of the katibin of Wahi, who used to, write down the ayat when Rasulullah would dictate it to them. But he had this habit of intentionally changing the words. And when Rasulullah found out, he basically kicked him out. He ran away, went back to Mecca, and he was included among those people to be killed even if they are found holding on to the parda of the Kaaba. But Osman reached to him first, took him under his protection, and then brought to Rasulullah. Rasulullah was silent for a moment. Not for a moment, for many, many moments, waiting for somebody to implement his standing order about this fellow. Nobody came forward. Later on they came to Rasulullah, why didn't you do ishara? And Rasul says, it's not, doesn't behave the Prophet to do ishara. You should have understood why I'm just, being silent. And you should have implemented my order about it. But then when that didn't happen, Rasulullah, accepted the assurance which was given by Osman with the condition that I don't want to see his face at all, and he is not to be seen in Medina. But after Rasulullah's wafat, when this fellow became the third Khalifa, he actually appointed him as one of the governors in his Khilafat. Asked him to come back into the city of Medina. Somebody whom Rasulullah said, I don't want to see his face. So these are some of the important elements of that Fath Makkah, which we should not be ignoring. Yes. This fellow, Abdullah bin Abi Sarah. Abi Sarah. 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 Yes. Abu Bakr and Umar were Qurayshi, but not from Banu Umayyah. No, they were from different tribes. Not that prominent. But they were Qurayshi, but not Umawi. Usman is from Banu Umayyah. The Prophet goes into the city of Makkah on, the journey from Makkah to Medina takes about 10 days. Enters the city on the 20th of Ramadan. And then the first thing, of course, he goes directly to the Kaaba and destroys the idols which were inside it, on the wall. And whenever he was doing this, he was reciting this ayat from Surah Isra, basically saying, جَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَحَقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. But there was one idol on the roof of the Kaaba, a very huge one. And this was the idol of Banu Khuda'a. And this is where Rasulullah asked Ali. And that's where Ali stands on the shoulders of Rasulullah so that he can reach to those, ropes which are holding that idol up there in order to break that and bring the idol down on the ground. And after that, Rasulullah did something which was really a kind of a revolution. This was a psychological revolution to the people of Makkah, who always resisted Islam. One of the reasons was that they said the Prophet is actually treating the black and the white or the brown and the rich and the poor on the same level. And right on that time of Fath Makkah, Rasul asked Bilal, a slave of the city of Makkah, to go on the roof of the Kaaba and to give the first adhan in the history of Makkah on an official level. And this was basically a very strong message that, لا فضل لعربي على عجمي ولا أسود على أبيض ولا أبيض على الأسود. And this was the issue of unity as far as mu'mineen are concerned. Then the Prophet gave a speech there. All the people of Makkah had gathered. This is where, this Dua Wahda that people recite. Actually, it's not Dua Wahda, but anyway, it's become famous as that. And it's not really the issue of holding hands. It's actually to raise your hands up. This was the tradition. Anyway, I'm not saying don't hold your hands when you do that. But I'm just telling you how the way it was done or the way it has come down in the riwayat. And that's where Rasulullah recites those words. That there is only one God, there is no God but Him. He is the one who destroyed the allies and basically fulfilled وَأَنْجَزَ وَعَدَ. He fulfilled His promise. The promise that He had given to the Prophet and the Muslims. And then he turns to the people of Makkah and he says, how should I treat you? The way you treated me? I was raised among you, you knew me, but you insulted me, humiliated me, even planned to kill me and force me to leave my own homeland. And this is where, of course they turned around and they said, no, we expect nothing but kindness and pity from you. You are a very gracious brother and a gracious nephew. Different generations were there. And Rasulullah also responded to them just as Yusuf alayhi salam has responded to his brothers, where he says, لا تثريب عليكم. He recited that ayat from Surah Yusuf. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. That there will be no blame on you today, and Allah will forgive you. He is the most merciful. And then he says, فَاذْهَبُوا فَأَنْتُمُ الطُّلَقَاءُ. You can go, you are freed slaves. Means technically, since Mecca was taken without any warfare, Rasulullah could make all of them his own personal slaves. But now he's saying, go, أَنْتُمُ الطُّلَقَاءُ, you are free. Talaqa is plural of taliq, which means a slave who has been made free. This is where Bibi Zainab in the darbar of Yazid, when she addresses Yazid, she says, min al-adl yabn al-talaqa, referring to the same incident of Fath Makkah. One of the consequences basically of the conquest of Mecca was that the tribes around were all, looking at what will happen between Quraysh and Muhammad. This was their outlook, and this is how they basically came into the fold of Islam, and that is why we see the following year is known as the year of delegations, and it's during that time that we see the ayat coming in. Regarding that time period, وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ, when the help of Allah comes, and victory. Victory referring to the conquest of Mecca. And number two, وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. And you will see, when you see the people entering into Allah's religion, أفواجا means in big groups, as fauj, as an army. And this is what refers to the days after Fatah Makkah, where many groups came in to express their loyalty to Islam and to become Muslims. This is the same time that Rasulullah basically sent different emissaries to different parts of the Arabian Peninsula. What we have been able to count in various books is there are about 25 letters were sent. 25 separate letters were written and sent from the Prophet to various rulers and tribal chiefs around Arabian and outside that. For example, we know that some of them were Christian rulers. The emperor of Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire, also got a letter. The king of Abyssinia, Najashi, also the king of Egypt got a letter. The chiefs of the tribes of Ghassan and Hanifa, these are major tribes in the northern part of Arabia. These were all, Christian, from Christian background. Of course, Yemen is there also. Bahrain also is there. And these were the different places that Rasulullah sent the letters, inviting them into Islam. And this is where we see one of the barakat of Sulh Hudaybiyah was that now there was no more harassment or difficulty for Muslims to travel around the Arabian Peninsula. And the surah then ends with the third ayat, فَصَبِّ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرُهُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا. There are three things here that we have to keep in mind. Then sing the praise of your Lord and ask His forgiveness, for He verily is Tawwab, means accepts the Tawbah very frequently. There are three things that we see. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing, now that you have the final victory of Islam over shirk, now that Makkah is in your control, you have to express your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Three things that we see here. Number one, tasbih, fasabbih, Tasbih basically means to glorify Allah in terms that, when you say, La ilaha illa huwa, this is tasbih. In a sense, you are removing all negative qualities from Him. He is not 2 or 3 or 4 or multiple gods. Whereas when we talk about hamd, that is more like, thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is a slight difference between tasbih and hamd. And then the third point here is istighfar. وَاسْتَغْفِرُهُ. Do istighfar, asks forgiveness. Now, the discussion comes in, and that's not the theme for tonight, that Rasulullah was a Rasul, he was a Ma'soom. Of course, when he does istighfar, it doesn't mean that he is committing sins. Especially after this surah was revealed, the Prophet was very constant in doing tasbih and hamd and istighfar. Now, when they do istighfar, it is of a different level. We are not even talking about the issue of guna. There is a phrase among the Shia ulama where they say, Hasanatul abrar, sayyiatul muqarrabin, which means good deeds of the virtuous people. Abrar means the virtuous good people. Hasanat means good deeds. So the good deeds of the good people is sayyiatul muqarrabin. When compared to those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a sin. So if we are only, let's say, doing 17 rakat only, well, that's good for us. And if Rasul does only 17, that's not good for him. Because the difference, the levels are different. So what is Hasanatul Abrar is Sayyiatul Muqarrabin. In that sense, now he's not doing a guna, although we know that as far as our Rasul is concerned, it is not only 17 rakat, he also had to do all the nafilah. All of them were wajib for him. So his situation was different, but even if you compare somebody else, if they are from the Muqarrabin, for them just to stop at that minimum level would demand that they do istighfar, not for a sin. So we are talking about a very different level here. It doesn't necessarily mean that these are all words said, they didn't mean it. No, they meant it, but we are talking about a very different level that we cannot even comprehend with our limitations and the status of being among those who are sinners. I think one of the important things here is that Allah says, I gave you Fateh Makkah. This was the biggest thing for Rasulullah. A city where he was born, a city where he was raised. This is his watan. But then his own people betray him, accuse him of so many things, reject him, conspire to kill him until he is forced to leave the city. Now he is coming back. He is coming back as a victor. So this was a very great thing. But this is a lesson that even when you have your greatest of accomplishments, do this tasbih of Allah, do the hamd of Allah, and do istighfar. This arrogance, sometimes we get this. I've done this and I've done that. Have some humility. Do some istighfar also with that. Don't only talk about what we did. Well, there might be many problems also in doing what we have done. So with all this issue of tasbih and hamd, istighfar here is a lesson for us. That have humility and ask forgiveness. And especially when you talk about doing istighfar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا. I think when we deal with one another, we have to do the same thing. We have to have that willingness. You look at Rasulullah, he actually implemented this concept in Fateh Makkah. The biggest victory given to him and the people who have really hurt him most. But what does he do? That is the example of his being rahmatun lil alameen. That when they said, we expect nothing from you but, kindness and forgiveness, he says, using those same words from Prophet Yusuf regarding his brothers, says, I let you go. And that is the message that we are getting from this tasbih and hamd and istighfar from the seerah of the Prophet in Fath Makkah. We'll conclude here, inshallah. We'll continue this issue of then what happened to the city of Makkah and how because not all of them became Muslims. There's still a big number of mushrikeen who remain mushriks, and what happened. And when inshallah we'll continue that discussion in the context of series of ayat from Surah Tawbah, inshallah. So that we have a complete closure of the discussion from Sulh Hudaybiyah to Fath Makkah and what happened to the city of Makkah itself. Any questions? We have 5 minutes. Yes. Well, the question here for the sisters is that he's saying if the Prophet decided to, name 4 to 7 people to be killed, irrespective where they are found, would not Abu Sufyan would be the first in the list? If it was me and you, yes, no doubt about that. But Rasulullah works on a different level. This issue of these people, wherever they are found, is actually announced by him before entering the city. Whereas Abu Sufyan already comes in now, brought by Abbas. Abbas was looking at it from a more political, point of view, just like Rasulullah married among these people. Similarly, Abbas looked at that situation that if Abu Sufyan is brought in, then there will be no chance of any resistance from the people of Makkah. And that's where, the Prophet now, somebody comes in the front and recites the Kalimatain, even after some hesitation. You take things at face value there. And that's why, he was not mentioned in that list. Yes, this is after, this is in the 8th year before Fath Makkah. Yes, there is no major battle between Mushrikeen and Makkah, between Sulh Hudaybiyah and Fath Makkah. There was Khaybar, but not with the Mushrikeen of Makkah, no. Let us conclude with dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbana atina fi dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Let us also recite Surah Fatiha for the one of the respected members of the community who passed away, was buried today, Marhum Mahmoud Habib, and the Marhumin of all those who are here. Bismillah.